Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Paul Weiss, who's here to share with us the blessing way. So what if the most transformative healing you can offer the world isn't through doing more, but through becoming a blessing in how you simply show up? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Paul Weiss is a highly acclaimed writer, teacher, and founder of the Whole Health Center in Blue Hill, Maine. His work encompasses Zen meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, and compassionate healing practices, drawing from decades of study and practice across various traditions. His counseling work incorporates a Buddhist-based cognitive behavioral therapy, couples communication processes, and expressive emotional recovery and integration work. In his practice, he also applies meditative awareness to what he called CNR, conscious neural recircuiting, and has elaborated the Tibetan compassion practice of Tonglen as a comprehensive therapeutic program he calls compassion, integration, and healing. So welcome to the show, Paul Weiss.
Hi, Marianne. Good to be with you, and good to have been talking with you a little while.
Well, my goodness, Paul, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your work and inspiration, and of course, the blessing way. But why don't we start with what inspired you to ever follow this path?
Well, okay, so the blessing way is simply, I don't actually want to put too much headline on the blessing way, even though I am using that term. It's just the latest evolution of a kind of a coming together of a vision of the integrated nature of being as actually ultimately a blessing, which means to say the thing that excited me about the word blessing, which kind of came to me spontaneously. And then I looked into that word. And, I thought, gee, that's a word that some people might think of as kind of, I don't know, they may have all kinds of associations with it. But it came to me strongly. And I looked up the etymology of blessing, and it actually comes from an old Indo-European root, which means to bring to flower or to blossom. And I said, oh, isn't that perfect? Because not only do I kind of feel as if my own work is about a kind of dedication to bringing things to wholeness or to flower, whether it's my work with people or even my poetry or my work in the world, but it's also the nature of reality as I've come to experience it, that there's something inherent in reality that is just wanting things to come to flower. That's the whole nature of things. If we were to talk about it in terms of God, we'd say, well, God, created the universe as a flowering of himself or herself into reality as a way of expressing the innate, just a love of being. And that somehow being is dedicated to itself, just as God is dedicated to his own creation. And that's not a dualistic thing in terms of this God up there creating this and loving it. In my experience, this whole existence is an outpouring of something fundamental that's inherently self-supporting and self-loving and bringing itself to flower. That encouraged me to stay with the word blessing way. And the actual origin of it in my own work is fairly recent. I was sitting in meditation um, one morning and few years ago. And as sometimes happens when I'm sitting in meditation, I just get a kind of a holistic sense of what is, and then something new kind of pours through. And in this moment, a piece of writing started pouring through me. And it was almost like being dictated, and almost to me, it was like a little sutra. It was just a little statement about the nature of reality that was just so simple and complete in itself. And in fact, I could even read it and talk about it a little bit. But suddenly at the end of it, it had a kind of a Buddhist flavor to it because that's really my fundamental foundation for my own study and teaching. And then suddenly the traditional Navajo or Diné blessing way prayer came through at the end of it. With beauty before me I walk, with beauty behind me I walk. And it seemed exactly appropriate because it was saying, if life is this beautiful flowering, how can we really align ourselves with that? And it kind of, affirm in those areas where it's so easy for us to bring in negation and where we do ourselves a disservice and we do life a disservice, that the affirmation of the traditional blessing way prayer seems so simple, obvious, and perfect that it had to be a part of this otherwise Buddhist sounding sutra. As I say, I don't really use the label blessing way a lot, although I finally decided to use that term on my new website. But it's just one of really a number of fundamental perspectives that I have on life and consequently on my work. So this all came through in the matter of, 2 or 3 minutes. And it was written out, well, and from there, oh, and actually this is relevant to talk about because I'm hoping that my next book, after I wrote this initial little sutra, which was very short, uh, I found more coming. And I ended up writing several pages of couplets that were like a longer sutra. Um, and that really talks about the whole nature of reality, the manifestation of reality, how we experience our place in it, where we fall into distortion and ignorance, how we bring in negativity, quite understandably, into the middle of something that's fundamentally positive. And this is, of course, in line with a lot of the spiritual teachings. Buddhism, of course, says that the fundamental nature of reality is basic goodness. And yet we're in ignorance of that for certain reasons, and we play out a very complex and often negative story. And of course, in the West, we would say, well, God is love, but yet look at the world. How did it get to be this? So there's a whole dynamic of how um, uh, our own processes of mind and awareness take us away, not only take us away from this direct perception of this fundamental goodness of life, but also consequently generate a world that becomes an expression of conflict and disharmony, etc., uh, and in our own psyches. So that continuing, the longer version of this explores all of that. But I'll just read this, which is now kind of an introduction to the whole thing. Oh, so what I wanted to mention was I'm thinking that my next book or piece of writing, what I'm at least promising myself to do, is to write a long explanatory or commentary on this whole piece of writing that really lays out in clearly and hopefully somewhat poetically, which I like to do, its real meaning. And it does really lay out where I'm coming from. It says the mandala of perfection pervades the universe. Now, of course, mandala is a word that may be strange to some people. When I use terms like that, which is like classical Sanskrit, or Buddhist terms, I'm always looking at what is the essence of what that means. There's always a certain esoteric way it's presented, but there's something fundamental there too. And a mandala, basically, we know it's this can be a picture of a certain diagram, or it can have different Buddhas in it. But basically, it structures the relationship between the heart of things, the center of things, to the periphery or to the expression. So by mandala, I mean just this integrated structure of how everything is. So we can say the integrated structure of how everything is inherently perfect, and that perfection pervades the universe as we experience it. The substance or the essence of this perfection is conscious, loving presence. So that is to say, there's three fundamental qualities of being that then manifest in all these forms. And this is also in keeping with basic Buddhist teaching, that there is a fundamental presence of being, which the Buddhists, in a way that can be very confusing, call emptiness, simply because it's empty of all the extra stuff we throw into things that our mind projects, the way we try to nail things down and fixate things. It's simply present, open space. And so therefore it is empty. So basically we can think of it as presence. When I'm resting in a relaxed, open, present way, and my mind is empty and I'm just allowing reality to speak to me, you might say. That's kind of emptiness in itself. So this emptiness is the basic presence. When I'm basically present, then that's this emptiness of being. And usually my presence is interfered with or is being preoccupied by my sense of a separate self. And I'm experiencing the world in terms of my self-interest and things that are good, things that bring me up, things that bring me down. And I think of that as myself being here. But if I relax that, then I'm just experiencing a presence of being that is open, empty, and somehow palpable. I think we may have all had at certain times a feeling of just presence, and that presence partakes of this greater presence of being. It's not being, shrunk down to my little self-conscious sense of being. And similarly, awareness, we say conscious, that presence is conscious. It's not just a inert being here. Consciousness or awakeness is inherent to life, to the universe. And similarly, my consciousness gets preoccupied with all the contents of my mind. But when I relax that, if I can relax that, and this is a great exercise to do, if I can begin to relax that attachment to all the content of my mind, I notice, well, the real story, so to speak, is that I'm conscious at all, that there's awareness. And if I can relax the content, I can just appreciate this quality of awareness, which is just like the light of being or illuminating experience. So I have basic empty presence, I have this illuminating experience, and then the loving, which is also is the fact that this present, awake presence, which is fundamental to the nature of the universe or to God, is also inherently loving, inherently blessing, inherently bringing things and supporting things to come to their most perfect completion. And that's the impulse to love that's in us. And Buddhism would sometimes call it a basic responsiveness, that this emptiness of being, this openness of being, also mysteriously has this responsive nature to engage, to create, to manifest. And also part of that is compassion. It's the caring about all being. And just like with the other two things, my compassion or my basic love gets kind of sidetracked and burrowed into through the lens of my ego, through the lens of my mind. It becomes channeled into all the kind of reactive emotions and responses to things because I'm responding to everything on this ego level or dualistic level. But when I relax that, I realize, oh, if I didn't care at all fundamentally, I wouldn't even have all these negative emotions because who cares? And as I begin to boil it down to its essence, it's fundamentally I care. And as I begin to relax into that caring, I say, yeah, basically, my nature is to love. And, as I say, that love can get thwarted or channeled in many directions. So it says the substance, that's all about the second line. The substance of this perfection is conscious, loving presence. That's the essence of what we have here. But how does it manifest? What is its way? What does conscious, loving presence do? And that's where I say its way is the blessing way. Its way is to bring into flower. Its way is to support the nature of being. So then I say every moment of awakeness that we have, every moment of presence, and every moment of love, even if we have one moment of just being fully present in our day or in our week, or a moment of being just completely openly aware in the moment, or just resting in a sense of love, that love, that awareness, that presence, even if it's for a drop of time, is not other than, it's not other than that greater presence that holds us. It's not other than that greater love that acts through us. It's not other than that fundamental awareness that in a sense sees through our eyes. And so a lot of contemplative work, contemplative tradition and meditation is about relaxing all the superficial identifications and structures and reactivity, so we can begin to relax back and experience our oneness with the underlying nature of presence, consciousness, and love, which I also call moving from identification to intimacy. Those are two other words I kind of work with a lot. When we're working with our minds, we're identified with all the content, we're identified with the stories, we're identified with all the things that our emotions or ego are telling us or how it's moving us. When we relax that identification, so in other words, we see everything through that screen of the things and the ideas that we're identified with, the way we see the world. But we have to relax that in order to actually be intimate with our experience. So even if I'm with another person, and even if it's a person I care about, for example, even, partners who love each other, and yet, in a sense, take each other for granted or see themselves through the screen of how they know each other. But then there are those certain moments of intimacy in the sense that all that falls away, and there's just an experience of the other person that doesn't have any definition, doesn't have any restriction. There's that intimacy of knowing. And in the same way, we can have that intimacy with our life, with nature, with the divine. And that can only happen when we relax the identifications of the mind and just come into intimacy. And so that is this underlying conscious loving presence that is the basis of our intimacy with life. So every moment of awakeness, every moment of presence, and every moment of love is a drop of that great ocean in which the whole ocean is present. And consequently, our every choice and our every act of blessing, every time we're able to choose to simply be here in this way and to be here for things, to be here for others, to set aside our self-consciousness or our self-centered demands and say, how can I be here for the flowering of this moment or of this thing or of this person? Every time I choose that or act that, this is an act of blessing which empowers, you might say, my true nature and the true nature of being, my ability to rest in that. I also call it the lightning bolt of transformation, the bell of wisdom, and the supreme remover of obstacles. It is the clearer of vision, and it is the redeemer of past, present, and future. And I say that because, again, past, present, and future exists really in our minds. It's part of our framework. And it all becomes part of the greater blessing when we just relax and be in the present.
One of the things I'm curious about is when we, are walking the blessing way, is it
Mm-hmm.
helping us release old habits and patterns that keep us stuck?
Well, again, as I say, my all new website has a description of what I mean by the blessing way, as well as some of these other terms that have become important to me, like intimacy, coherence, and various other words that maybe I'll talk about later. But what I explain is the blessing way is not just some kind of ideal saintly path of walking in some kind of perfection. The blessing way is our intention for our own, even for our own flowering, which means our flowering has to mean our learning process, our making mistakes and trying again, but with the intention of becoming more available to life, not collaborating with our defensive systems and our old stories, but finding that place in us that keeps coming up that really wants to unfold that and liberate that and learn and grow. So the blessing way just includes our own desire to grow, and similarly, our support for other people's growth. So it's not about it's absolutes of I'm going to be perfect and I'm going to get you to be perfect. It's about I'm going to become a part of this pattern of unfolding growth that is the nature of the unfolding of the blessing way. And so the blessing way not only includes my capacity to be open and supportive and compassionate, to others or to myself or to life, but it also includes my honest vulnerability and observation and learning, right, from my own limitations, my own errors, And so it's a very human path. So it's really one with when you ask, does the blessing way support us? Um, they are part and parcel of each other. Uh, it does give us a reference point to say, yeah, that's what I want. I want to become clearer. I want to become supportive. What gets in the way of that? So in that sense, the idea of the blessing way supports our work. Um, but just to do our work is the blessing way. If I'm committed to growing, I, and it's amazing how many, you might say we know people who are just somewhat complacent or stuck in their stories. And we don't see that movement by and large. And there are other people who are always trying to understand and to grow and to learn. And so the blessing way certainly is supporting us in doing that. Um, and just to finish the little bit of this one thing, so it says, it is the Redeemer of past, present, and future. It is the true nature of being that is expressed as the upholding of all being. So, when we uphold being, it means I'm upholding being to be what it is, not to conform to some idea or projection or ideal. So if I am upholding you, for example, I'm not upholding you to be perfect according to some idea I have. I'm upholding you and supporting you to go through your process, however that is, to unfold yourself to your fullest possibility. And only life knows how to do that, not me. But I can be supportive of that by how I be available, empathetic, compassionate, and attentive, and mainly here for you without projecting all my stuff onto you. I'm holding space and I'm in support of your growth. So it's the true nature of being expressed as the upholding of all being, and it's the true nature of experience expressed as the upholding of all experience. The reason I said it both ways is being sounds very abstract. Okay, being upholds being, but it also is our every minute experience that's learning to simply be there and uphold and allow and be present for moment to moment experience. It is the dynamic activity of blessing within this mandala of conscious loving presence, this integrated relational structure of conscious loving presence. It is the dynamic activity of blessing in the mandala of conscious loving presence, which is also the mandala of beauty and primordial intimacy. Primordial intimacy, because it is all one, essentially. It's not the intimacy of two coming together, it's the intimacy of one being one with itself, but which is expressed as two, expressed as many. So, in other words, our intimacy, you and I, when we are capable of experiencing it, is really just another expression of the fact that we all are already intimate, or each in a sense one in God, one in the nature of reality. So that's primordial intimacy. Always uphold this blessing way. Always utter this supreme transformative mantra of body, voice, and mind. And then it comes through that voice came through with the Navajo blessing way, with beauty before me I walk. And then when we say these things, this is a kind of a self-healing. It's not meant just to be an affirmation, but it's a time to allow into a life where there's so much uh, negative feeling or fear or guilt or discouragement, and self-limitation. It's almost to say, what would it feel like if I cleared the air and thought that this field into which I'm walking, this field of being, this field of my next moment, this field of whatever life is going to open, however it's going to open to me in the next moment, is inherently beauty. And of course, the Navajo term that's translated as beauty, actually suggests a fundamental harmony of being. So that there's a harmony and a beauty that I'm walking into. And so let me relax and be available to it. In many ways, the receiving of blessing is even harder for us than the giving of blessing. And there are a whole bunch of stories about that, actually. But so let me allow, with beauty before me, I walk. That's clearing my path into the future. With beauty behind me, I walk. I carry such a load, right, of regret or of loss or of disappointment or of incompleteness or whatever that may be, that I carry with me every day. Let me drop that and just feel that there's a wind at my back from my own past. And that everything I've done in my past, even if I look back at it as failure or loss, is all part of an unfolding. And that it's fundamentally beauty encouraging me on. And so that's why I say it's the clearer of past, present, and future, the clearer of vision when we walk this way. It's that healing. With beauty above me, I walk. All those powers of creation and of the heavens and of the just those energies flowing into my being is a support, is beauty and support. And from the earth below me, all those nurturing forces of the earth are beauty and are supporting me. And with beauty around me, I walk. So these aren't just like affirmations where I'm trying to pretend or deny that there's difficult things going on. They're invitations to find a place, with a healing place within me, in which I can allow an open space for healing and appreciation, so that I'm not just unnecessarily burdening myself with all kinds of unconscious negativity and restrictions, in ways that I disable myself or disable my ability to be there for others. So that is a little bit of the blessing way. And really, it's no different. You see, it just grows out of the work that many of us are doing. And I've done my whole life in psychology, in spiritual work, in the counseling work I do, in the emotional integration processing work that I do, in the work with couples on communication and creating more intimate communication. Uh, it's all the accumulation, of all this work. And it was just coming together as realizing in this one thing, oh, it's all part of this flowering of life wanting to flower. And the gratitude that, oh, that's what my work is about. Life somehow wanting to use me in some little way to help its own flowering. So this is just something at the end of many decades of work in a lot of the healing arts, and as well as the counseling and mental health work, and a lot of work with meditation and spiritual teaching. This was just the latest, you might say, poetic form in which it arose for me. And so I've been calling it the blessing way.
So let's talk about integrity and reciprocity.
Yes,
So, why don't you break that down? Because I think for a lot of people, that sounds like big words, and we might not know exactly how this all ties in.
absolutely. Exactly. So this too, because of these two words, integrity and reciprocity, have meanings on many different levels. So we normally think of integrity as, oh, someone you can trust. You can trust his word. They're reliable. They're honest. They'll do what they say. They care about the quality, perhaps, of their work. This is what we call integrity. But we may make the connection that you can't really have integrity. That integrity implies that there's some kind of unity within us, that we're coming from a place of wholeness. Otherwise, to the extent that I'm emotionally and mentally divided, I've got different motivations, that my emotions are going one way, my mind is going another way, my judgments are going another way, my stress response, survival responses are going another way. When I'm not integrated within myself, if I've got unconscious motivation, if I've got fears, if I've got, different things, then it's hard for me to act with integrity, because I'm a fragmented person in some way. I don't have that emotional and functional balance or integration. So, so integrity suggests that that we have come to a increasing integration in our knowing of ourselves and of our availability to ourselves, and that's a process that's not so easily come by, because we all have these parts of ourselves that have been split off, that have been hurt, that are unconscious, that we avoid, etc. And so most of us do an imperfect job of having that integration. So a lot of my work is, again, on the emotional level and on the meditational level, how do we begin to open up to become aware of and to include the parts of ourselves that we tend to split off? Because they're painful, or we think they're telling us something about ourselves we don't like, or whatever it is. And we feel like in order to survive, we have to not go there. That feeling, for example, I can't afford to feel that feeling. That feeling is hurtful to me or will send me in a wrong direction. And I think that's a fundamental fallacy because as I have said, feelings, this is kind of almost a funny expression, feelings never hurt anyone. Anything I've ever felt is not what hurt me. What's hurt me in my life is all the effort I go through to avoid feeling my feelings, which is going to include a lot of dysfunctional behavior and splitting off from parts of myself. You see? So counterintuitively, and all healing, and of course, all psychological work obviously includes emotional work, has to include turning back towards the feelings and being willing to feel what we thought we couldn't afford to feel. Because the feelings, well, let me add something else to that. So when we split off from our feelings, if we don't feel directly, instead we live in whatever stories come up to support our life or our separation from our feelings. When we have feelings, often we use the term I feel this or I feel that. But I think what we really mean is I felt it just enough to have a story about it. I know what that feeling is. I know what it means to me, and I'm already off into my story. And I'm never really just simply feeling the feeling directly. And it's the stories that capture us, that fixate us, that send us into split off and dysfunctional behaviors. If my whole being learned that I could turn back and just feel that feeling, then all of me is present at that moment, feeling that feeling. And it's just a feeling. Suddenly, my awareness, my presence, and my felt feeling life become one. And there's already a healing going on there. And in fact, it's a very compassionate thing to do. Instead of pushing away all those feelings, I turn to them and say, we think of all of our feelings, our most difficult feelings, as our own little children that are split off from us. And we say, come back. Let me see you. Let me hold you. Let me feel you. So that's a very compassionate attitude towards the things we've been pushing away. So consequently, that comes to another area that I've been writing about, which I call compassion, integration, and healing. We have to have compassion enough to create the space in which integration can happen, where all the parts of ourselves feel welcome to come onto the stage, so to speak, and just be there, knowing that this presence and awareness that we are can welcome them. And that I can tolerate going through feelings that I thought I couldn't, because a lot of those feelings, this is one other interesting thing, a lot of feelings, primal feelings that we have that deeply affect us happen when we're very young, where certain parts of our story get implanted very young, and we have emotional experiences that are overwhelming to us at a time when certain parts of our brain are very undeveloped and we don't have the capacity to integrate them. The only way we can withstand feelings like that is to split off from them and to kind of develop around them and then get kind of fixated on the stories we've created. And we carry that, we kind of limp along through our whole life that way. Now, as adults, we have the ability to feel those feelings and to integrate them because the part of the brain necessary to do that is fully developed. So we have to relearn that we're no longer children, that we don't have to be afraid of those feelings. So that becomes a very important part of integrity. So I talk about, in counseling work, anything that begins to integrate our understanding of our own life, starting with the stories. I tell all these stories, but we get lost. We don't even have our own stories straight. So that's an important part. But then I have to go deeper into my feelings and learn how and get support for staying present in the face of them and discovering that when I do that, it's not terrifying. It's actually very liberating. Probably the single most liberating work we can do is to learn how to go back into those feelings we most fear, and with any necessary support we need, stay present with them, feel them, breathe with them, and even give expression to them if we have to, because we've been holding that back for so long. When we do that, the air clears, we've become more integrated, we feel more one with ourselves, we feel more empowered, and our life has that much more integrity to it. So this is one level of integrity. When we have integrity, therefore, we're more able to fulfill the other function of our life, which is reciprocity. We live in a world with others. We live in a world that's not just me. As I have a growing wholeness of being, I can be present for others in a whole way and be in reciprocity in a whole way. Prior to that, I can't quite be in reciprocity because, in a sense, everyone's playing a part in my story of how I need to be okay or I need things to be. So my ability to be reciprocal is compromised by that. But if I feel whole in myself, then I'm just here. And therefore, I can just be here for you. And therefore, we can engage in a genuine reciprocity, which means I allow you to see who I am, and I'm totally present here for who you are, period. So that's what I mean on this personal level, which is, I think, to me, a basic definition of human health, mental, emotional, spiritual health. Interestingly, if we go back a second, they each participate in each other because the only reason I'm finding my way to integrity is because there's a growing reciprocity between the parts of myself, between my emotional life, my intellectual life, my being able to be in my body, my being able to shine the light of my awareness on what's going on, my being able to bring in my caring and my heart. So all these parts of myself are becoming reciprocal and hence creating integrity. With that integrity, I can be reciprocal and be there for you and for life around me and for my community, which means it's creating the next level of integrity. If you and I can be present together in a whole way, there's more integrity between us. If the life of the community, and this has a big teaching for us, I think, at the social level, where we have the same acting out and splitting off, and people who we reject or can't deal with, or we, label. And so the integrity of community and the integrity of our caring for all people and for the well being of all people breaks down. So, again, the same principle as I come into greater reciprocity, as my desire for the welfare of all people becomes more innate, the life of the community has more integrity. The life of the nation would have more integrity. I often say there are only two things that the Congress of the United States needs. One is integrity, and the other is reciprocity. So even at the most basic level. So that's just an example. And anybody would agree with that. That's not a politically controversial statement. But when we think about, just imagine if everybody in our governing bodies had integrity and had a capacity for reciprocity. Everything else would get settled one way or another, whatever the differences in opinion or divide or belief. But there's a great absence in both. And so the systems break down and we see what we see. And then the final thing about integrity and reciprocity, as I say, coming from this cosmic point of view, is it's the nature of reality. That, as I was describing before in the mandala of the blessing way, there is one wholeness of being which is reciprocal with itself, which is manifesting as this interrelational world in reciprocity with itself. And so when we come into our own fullness of being, emotionally and psychologically, we're really also fulfilling our innate spiritual nature, you might say.
So let's talk about coherence and transparency. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I'll be able to say that more simply. So coherence is similar to integrity. So and this is a beautiful, normally, as I said before, I'm more incoherent. If I don't have that integrity, it's like normally we're going down through my mind is working in one direction. I'm projecting all these different thoughts. I have all these stories going on. My body is living its own life, and I'm really disconnected from my body, perhaps. My emotions are going in another direction. My breath is probably expressing a kind of erratic breathing because I'm in a more stressful or erratic state. As I deliberately come back to the present moment, and this is a very simple meditative process that we can all work on, and it's true of all probably basic meditation and mindfulness practices. The first thing I do is I bring my awareness back to this moment that's already more coherent. I watch my breath rising and falling, and that also begins to relax my breath and make my breath more coherent. As I come into a more balanced, relaxed state of coherence, it also sends a message to my heart of safety and well-being, and my heart rate becomes more coherent. And so there's a growing coherence in my being. And when there's a growing coherence in my being, it means I'm more relaxed, more present, more available. And again, this screen of all my thoughts and projections and worries and fears begin to relax. And I'm more present with things as they are. At the deepest level of meditational practice, our coherence, you can think of coherence as becoming like a lake, a still, open, coherent lake, a lake that was all ruffled and stirred up by all these different winds. Is becoming more relaxed and open and clear. And when the lake is calm and open, it can reflect the moonlight, can reflect the sunlight, it can reflect things more perfectly. So as we become more coherent, there's less interference patterns with the light of being, with the light of reality around us, with even the idea of separateness begins to relax. And that we can more easily relax into, you might say, just a more non-dual awareness of being a part of this greater presence of reality in this moment. There's less self-concern, self-worry, and less and proliferation of thinking. So we become coherent, and then we begin to become more transparent. And transparent simply means that I'm not putting up some kind of an outline wall or separation between myself and life, to myself in this moment. So that's an emotional state. And in certain levels of meditation activity, it becomes a direct experience of, as we say, being one with everything, to use the hackneyed phrase. But it's true.
Oh my God. So, when we dive into identification and intimacy, how does that relate to all of this?
Okay, so I've kind of implied, I kind of mentioned to that. So we can't be intimate with reality if we're identified with all of our own stories about it. And it's a subtle thing because I know there are the obvious stories and beliefs I have, but there's also a subtle story that I have, even right down to naming things. I think I know what everything is, which is pretty innocent, except it means normally I'm living my life in terms of what I understand things to be instead of being in an open, receptive place. It's like I was saying before about intimacy between people. Even if we may the moments, even in a good relationship, that's a compatible relationship, but the moments of actual intimacy, and I'm not just talking about the way it's usually used in terms of sexuality or knowing each other, but where you're really there and present and aware of. It's almost like soul meets soul when there's none of the outer things, and that's a very. Some people might even not know what that means. It's just like a very far out idea, but it's something that's immediately available and it is, we might say, very mind blowing. And it's not that difficult. A lot of the other work that I do, this is a good time for me to talk about that because this has been central to my work for 40 years. And I didn't create this process, but I've been working with it very intensively. There was a process that was created in the late 60s, early 70s by a very brilliant teacher that became to be known as the Enlightenment Intensive. It was called that because people coming together and working with this process, it seemed to facilitate the ability for people to have enlightenment experiences or these sudden shifts of awareness of non-dual experience. And what was unique about this process and what was found to be so effective, and it really integrates all the principles we've been talking about, is it combined meditation with communication. And it really taught how to be, first of all, in our meditation or contemplation, we're becoming intimate with our own experience. We're just so we're learning how to be open to what's arising for us. And in this case, we're working with the question, who am I? Not to try to answer it intellectually, but to just be there in an openness, holding that question as a way of being open and being open to ourselves and not doing anything else. It's just contemplative. I'm just here. Who am I? And over time, as we sit, and it's a long process, as over time, I'm learning to become open. I'm not trying to solve the question, but I'm learning how to become open to all these aspects of myself and insights about myself that will begin to rise to the surface when I'm just here being open to it. And then when something comes up for me, some openness or understanding about myself or whatever's coming up for me, I communicate it. I'm sitting across from another person and I communicate it. So there's this open field of awareness coming up and being spoken to another, awareness coming up and being spoken to another. And I'm only speaking about myself. I'm not laying any trip on the other person. Then at a certain point, there's a changeover. We ring a bell. And now I, who have been doing this process, I'm just there for the other person. And the other person does that same process. As he or she is doing this and communicating to me, I am just listening to that person. And the whole time, I am resting in eye contact. We're both resting in eye contact. So, what happens in that process is that all the outer projections and layers and personalities begin to fall away. And the combination of the integrity of this inner work with the reciprocity of being fully available to the other person is probably, I feel comfortable saying, the most transformative kind of experience we can have. And many people who've been through the process would say so. So, again, normally, see, if I say, who am I? We could say that most of my ordinary life is concerned with piling up information and ideas about who I am so that I can act from that place or get ahead or whatever, or describe or give me a story about why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, etc. But here we're dropping the answers and coming into a place of complete not knowing. Who am I? To say who am I is a way to be totally available and not to know the most basic thing, and yet available to it, open, conscious, present. And so consequently, the barriers of our mental processes begin to relax and fall away, and deeper levels of understanding or insight, and even transformative insight, may arise and get communicated, and the speaking of it also further embodies it and makes it real. So my identification with my former unconscious answers and ideas fall away, and I become progressively more intimate with the reality of me and the reality of myself in relationship to another and the reality of the other person. And that is stunning. It's like the most complete kind of transformative healing and growth that we could ask for. Of course, it does happen in an intensive workshop setting. It doesn't change our life for good, but it gives a tremendous impulse, and we have to continue to do the work in our life that's consistent with that.
I know you
Yeah.
also touch on conscious loving presence, and I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Yeah. So that I've also, I guess, because I've referred to that earlier, this underlying, when we just relax, as all these things are going on, as we begin to relax into coherence, which means we're simply more present and available as a whole, as we relax into intimacy with this moment, as we begin to relax our identification with all of the structures of the mind or the ego. See, the mind, the ego, or the mind is it's just like something that has, I'm forgetting the word anyway, but kind of shrunk down to a certain level of functioning. There's a certain absolute truth of being. And mind or ego is a process of shrinking that absolute truth down to a relative level. So if the absolute truth is this great presence of universal being, it's like this fundamental I of being. Now that I is shrunk down to this little idea of me is the I we're talking about here. It's like a circle has been drawn around the whole. Within the space of openness of being, the mind draws a circle in the middle of it. It's an imaginary circle and says everything on the inside of that circle is me, and everything on the outside is everything else. And I have to figure out how to support what's on the inside of this circle. So, at the worst, of course, that can lead to very self centered, selfish, destructive, and dysfunctional behaviors. At the best, as we learn and grow, it can be very beautiful and open, but it still limits the final awareness, the final transparency of what we're capable of realizing that we are fundamentally, that this consciousness has not been shrunk down to our level of the ego, that love has not been shrunk down, that presence has not been shrunk down. And so we can use this term, conscious loving presence, as a way of reminding ourselves when we're sitting and being present. Say, just let me relax and feel, as I said before, the nature of my own presence. And let me relax the I out of it and enjoy this sense of presence of being that I am participating in this moment. And of course, if I wasn't aware, I wouldn't be participating in it. But this awareness is not just my little awareness, it's also the nature of being. And as I relax, I can feel as if my own awareness is just part of this greater awareness. My own presence is this part of this greater presence. When we do that, inevitably, we're going to have a growing sensation of love, because love arises naturally as part of that openness of being. And so we can begin to rest with a sense of conscious, loving presence. That phrase arose for me. I mean, it's all my life has been very experiential. It did come once, when I was sitting in meditation many years ago. I just looked around me. Somehow and these 2, 3 words just flowed into me: conscious, loving presence. I said, oh, that's what this is. The only thing that's going on here is conscious, loving presence. And it's not just me being conscious, loving, and present. There only is conscious, loving presence. So in this way, my own teachings have grown, always have some reference point to my own direct experience, which relates to the book that I wrote, The Dharma of Direct Experience, that we have this capacity for directly experiencing these things, not just knowing them ideally or intellectually. And there's a path for doing that. And none of this is about a prescription for us saying, therefore, we've got to do that, and that's what okayness is. Everything is beautiful. Everything is fine the way it is. But all these are invitations and blossomings and possibilities and things that we can experience directly, and consequently just become more serviceable as a way of sharing it with others. I have to say, the if we talk about the basics, and Buddhism says, emptiness, awareness, and responsive being, or we could say conscious, loving presence. These are the 3 building blocks, or the nature of being. But I have to add a 4th one, and that's humor. All those 4, forget it if it was no humor. So I think humor deserves a place in that pantheon of the 4 essential aspects of reality.
Well, Paul, where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about your work?
Yes, well, I'm very excited. I'll just quick brief history. I've been functioning for 44 years. I had a center called the Whole Health Center, which was the center for all the work. The community work was a wonderful, vibrant community. We did retreats and residential retreats. We did all kinds of groups, and I did my counseling there. I've only just had to leave that physical plant a year ago. I'm kind of in transition. So I don't yet have a new place, but I'm still doing my work. So I'm still meeting with people. I'm still out in the community, and I'm in the process of creating a new physical location. But my website has just changed a bit to reflect that change, and we have just we've just finally created and completed this new website I'm very excited about. So the first thing I would encourage people to do is to check out our website, which is thewholehealthcenter.org. The word "the" is helpful for finding it, thewholehealthcenter.org. And it's really focusing a little bit more on my own work right now, independent of the center that we had. But that may also evolve again. So that website actually includes a lot of information and discussion of a lot of all the principles that we've been talking about here. I kind of really use that website to really talk about everything that's important to me, as well as what I have to offer. So people can connect with me via that website. I'm available for counseling and for spiritual mentoring, live and online or by phone. And I'm also teaching online, and those programs are currently announced and available and will continue to be announced. And I look forward to doing more retreats and teaching again out in the world. I just did a beautiful retreat at a Buddhist center in New Hampshire, working with Tonglen, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but it's also about this profound reciprocity of being and how we be there for others with compassion. So I would say that the website is probably the best avenue. The website also has both my books referenced on it with some excerpts and ways to order it. It has a number of talks, a growing number of talks that I've given on meditation topics and growth topics, and even a couple of interviews. I would say that's the best. And again, I was going to say the books, but now it's all mentioned on that website. So that website will open you to everything. Please feel free to be in touch with me at any time. I just love being in touch with people.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you, Marianne. I really appreciate that you have turned your attention in my direction for a little while. And it's lovely talking with you and being on your show.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about the blessing way. Again, if you'd like to connect with Paul at his website, you can at thewholehealthcenter.org for more information on his work, his books, and of course, making an appointment with him. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.